Welcome to our weekly briefing call on what is day 75 of Israel's war with Hamas. I'm Gary Kushner, Jewish National Fund USA Vice President of Communities and Regions. I have the honor of standing in for our president, Dr. Saul Lizabram, who had another JNF-USA commitment today. Last week, Dr. Lizabram was on this call from Israel, where he and his wife, Lauren, participated in JNF-USA's first volunteer mission. They were with a group of 80 volunteers from across the United States. The second volunteer mission is currently in Israel with nearly 100 volunteers. When the idea to do these missions first came up, it was hoped that there would be at least 25 participants per mission. Well, the numbers are exploding now, and by the end of this week, we'll have 1,000 people from the United States and Canada registered to participate in one of our volunteer missions that are scheduled through the end of March. I look forward myself to joining the March 9 to 14 mission. If you want to register for an upcoming mission, go to jnf.org/travel. While they were in Israel last week, JNF-USA CEO Russell Robinson and Dr. Lizabram had meetings with many mayors of regional councils and community leadership from Western Negev communities. They also met with many communities who absorbed thousands of evacuees. There's no question that the repair and rehabilitation process of Western Negev communities will take many months and hundreds of millions of dollars. But JNF is committed to working in partnership with local stakeholders on the right business approach to redevelopment. Our team in Israel is already currently doing a needs assessment and working to develop a master plan that will guide our rehabilitation work. As we've discussed on past calls, we'll need to count on your continued support if we are to meet the needs of these communities, while also continuing our ongoing work to build a stronger Israel. You've always been with us in the past, and I know you'll be with us going forward. So let me thank you now for what you've done and what you will continue to do as a partner of Jewish National Fund USA. We're pleased to have with us as our first presenter today, Colonel Miri Eisin, who's the Managing Director of the International Institute for Counter-Terrorism. Colonel Eisin served in the Israeli intelligence community and retired from active duty at the rank of full colonel in 2004. Over her 20-year career in the military, she served as the deputy head of the Combat Intelligence Corps, the personal assistant to the Director of Military Intelligence, and as the intelligence officer in combat units and research departments. We have a very full agenda today, so please accept my apology if we're not able to get to your questions in chat. I'll do my best to read them myself just to expedite time frame, but we'll do our best to give you a really full briefing today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Colonel Eisin.
Miri, thank you so much. And I'm going to say the good evening here in Israel, good afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Thank you for joining. To me, as an Israeli sitting inside Tel Aviv right now, it's enormously supportive to know that you're listening in and continuing to being engaged. That's not something that I take for granted at all. So here we are. It is December 20th. We're on, and I say this with all of the challenges, we're on day number 75, and I don't even know how to understand that. Because in Israel, in our 75 years of existence, we've had a war that was a year and a half. That's the War of Independence. It was very different. But since then, in the wars that the state of Israel has engaged as a sovereign state, mainly against other countries, other states, if it was Egypt or Jordan or Syria, or for that matter, Lebanon. And yes, Yemen has sent troops against Israel in the past, as has Morocco, and I'll get to Yemen soon. The 75 days, for me, are part of the changes of how we look at this war. What do I want to do right now in that sense? I want to be able, as much as possible, to give you an idea of what we're looking towards, as opposed to giving you a history of the last 75 days. Hamas started a war. I want to be clear. They started a war on purpose. They did not do a terror attack. They certainly did not do a suicide terror attack. They planned for a very long time a combined attack that had different stages and were in a stage where they thought that they would be doing way better. In what way do I mean? After the scorched ground, the horrific events of October 7th, they did not do that as a suicide squad. And I use these words not lightly. They did this as a combined attack to enter into Israel's northwest Negev, into those many communities that you all support, to murder, to kill, to torture, and to take mass hostages. When they did so, they view the hostages, and my heart goes out. I'm going to be very specific in that way, because Hamas views them as a bargaining chip. Hamas uses them in a variety of ways. Hamas, in that sense, sees the hostages as their Hamas defense. That is how they see themselves being defended against the Israeli Defense Forces, and in that sense, being used by the entire world. So where are we at this stage? Israel did not just respond to Hamas. We officially declared war. We have been at war from October 7th. And in that war, Israel put two different aims, and they're equal objectives. I need every hostage to come back, and I need to destroy Hamas. I need to destroy Hamas, and I need every hostage to come back. You all understand, because you are supporters and understanders and involved, that this is not an easy, simple task. Do we stop everything, bring back the hostages, and then Hamas is not destroyed? Do we stop everything, bring back the hostages, and then destroy Hamas? There's another side to that equation. It's called Hamas. Hamas, until now, see the hostages as a bargaining chip. They've never given out any kind of information about the entire list. They do it in such a way to torture us. Can I use a different word? They do it in such a way to terrorize us. They are a genocidal terror organization. I don't believe them. I've lived my entire adult life looking at both terror organizations, states, countries. There's a whole complexity that goes into it. But I challenge us all right now, because the stage that Israel is in trying to both, and this is not easy, put that kind of pressure and continue to destroy those portions of Hamas that we can without hurting the hostages. And we all understand how complex this is. I don't like the word complex anymore, but how heartbreaking it is. And we all want the hostages to be back right now, and we all want the state of Israel to continue to exist. Both those who have hostages who are there, who want everything to stop, and I understand that, and those of us who right now want both to happen, and none of it is going to be pretty. Where does that put us right now? Over the last few days, there's been more dialogue about the idea that there will be an additional, what the term is humanitarian pause. The entire world will call it a ceasefire. Israel will call it a humanitarian pause. Why does it matter? Because in this sense, just like the humanitarian pause of the last time that brought out 100 hostages, which is not enough, but we are dealing with the terror organization called Hamas. This isn't about you get to do everything the way you want. And the only reason then they let out 100 people is because of that combined impact of both their feeling, the military crunch, that they are in their own way in defense, but they brought the hostages to be their ultimate defense. And that makes it such a complicated situation. So when I look around right now, the developments that have happened since, as I look into the future, is that I do expect there to be an additional pause. Pause, not ceasefire. Pause. In that pause, I will look and see hostages come home. There will be hostages that will come home in such a pause. But can I promise me, Israel, me, Miri, that all of them will come back? The other side is called Hamas, the genocidal terror organization. The other side listens to me, Miri, and to all Israelis saying, we're out to destroy Hamas. They want to use the hostages as their defense. Are there other ways about it? I think that Israel is exploring every way possible. There's never going to be a way that all of us are going to be happy about. If we stop everything, bring them all back, we don't really know who they're going to bring back. When we bring them back, we don't know how that's going to happen. I give it because I feel that we all build up expectations and hopes, and this is a heartbreaking, harsh war. The war is not contained just to the Gaza Strip. Over the last, here we are, week number 11, day number 75, inconceivable inside Israeli ideas. There has been a consistent war up north. Don't call it anything else. Call it a war of attrition. Don't, and again, for people who are involved in Jewish National Fund, and we're so involved in the reconstruction of the communities themselves, of the physical aspects of the Northern Negev, oh my God, they need that. But please remember, there are dozens of communities up north who have not been in their communities, not in their kibbutzim, not in their moshavim, not in the city of Kiryat Shmona, not in the city of Shlomi, who have not been there almost for the same, in that sense, 10 weeks. It was a little bit gradual there. They were evacuated, so you didn't have, and that is so important, the horrific deaths of down south, but those people are just as dislocated. They moved away. They moved away quickly. They can't go to their homes to take things. The homes themselves in Kibbutz Yiftach or in the town of Metula, in the city of Kiryat Shmona or in the city of Shlomi are being fired at, anti-tank weapons at. Hezbollah has created de facto a kind of, and I'm very wary of the term that I'm about to use, but they have created almost what I would call a buffer zone into Israel, where the Israeli citizens who were living inside their towns, villages, communities, kibbutzim, moshavim, communities, etc., cannot live inside their places, cannot farm, cannot go to their agricultural areas, cannot go to their factories that are next to the border. They're inside Israel. In its own way, similar yet so not similar to down south. The Israeli Chief of Staff visited up north today. When he spoke up north just in the last few hours, the Israeli Chief of Staff said, we can't go back to the situation up north as what we had before. And I'm giving you a glimpse into the future. We inside, we Israel, we the Israeli Defense Forces are trying to systematically target and take apart Hamas's military capabilities in the Gaza Strip. We are trying to bring back the hostages. That means that there's some kind of negotiations going on, because at the end, both the outer people of Hamas, not the ones from inside the Gaza Strip, are all kind of convening in towards Egypt over the last few days. That means that something's going on. I'm looking at it from the Arab side, not necessarily from the Israeli side. And by the way, if there's no negotiations going on, and they are all talking about, and there is, but they're all talking about the fact that Ismail Haniyeh and other figures are convening into Egypt, that means that Hamas is under pressure, that they need to go to the Egyptians, that they need to get out both from Qatar and from Turkey and to convene on and in and to show their own strength. I know this is anything happy about this, but it does mean that they're under pressure. That's important. They need to feel that they're under pressure. They not only did a genocidal terror attack, they hold our hostages. You have to pressure them. That's part of what you need to do for us as Israel to be able to continue to be here and to bring them home. Why did I connect it also to Hezbollah on the northern front? Because we're in for a long war. At this stage along the way, in the ground operation combined with the air operation inside the Gaza Strip, as all of you know, and this isn't about the exact number, it's about the big number. A large amount of, and I'm going to say, civilians and Hamas terrorists have been killed inside the Gaza Strip. And I put them in both. There are civilians there. They may be supporters of Hamas or not, but they're civilians. They're not necessarily the active fighters. And that number in itself is having an impact, certainly on public opinion, not as much on governments as you would think, listening to the rhetoric of governments around, the support of the United States, and I'll do this here for the JNF crowd, and I say it from my guts, okay? Essentially, what everybody wants in governments is that Israel should crush Hamas, and can we please not kill so many civilians? And I have to tell you, I wish we could. If you have an idea of how, bring it out there. We all need to crush Hamas, and we all need for ourselves to try, for us, for our own moral level, to try as much as possible. We never target civilians. And then you go, we don't. 3 men killed, hostages, how horrible. They're inside a war zone. We have this tendency to look at this as if it's like, walking down Fifth Avenue. It's not. They're in a war zone. So when I look at this greater aspect of the international pressure, when it comes to that and our need to both crush Hamas inside the Gaza Strip and bring back the hostages, the pressure that we're putting into there and what's going around, I think that there will be a pause soon, and I think that that will be a humanitarian pause, and I'm very hopeful that then they'll bring back hostages. I can't say all of them, but the war is not going to be over. That war against Hamas and the Gaza Strip is going to continue. It may not be at the high intensity that it is right now. It'll be low intensity. Should I give you the examples of what low intensity means? Low intensity is that we're in the Gaza Strip, in all of the areas that we've already kind of taken and slowly destroying that Hamas infrastructure. And then from those areas, we continue to act, but slowly, systematically, not full power as we've been doing now in the Gaza Strip, but more similar to some of the military operations that are taking place under this war inside Judea and Samaria, into the city of Jenin, into the city of Tulkarem, into different areas. It's going to go on. I need you to understand that. I need us to breathe in deep. Now breathe in deeper. Did you hear what I said before about the chief of staff? There is an issue that needs to be addressed. So I'll say what I said again about if you have an idea of how we can crush Hamas and not kill civilians, bring it out. Now's the time. It was 2 months ago. I say this every time, and I don't mean it cynically. I don't know of a different way to do it. I don't know of anybody who knows of a different way to do it without letting Hamas win. Do you have an idea of how you make Hezbollah, who has 10 times the capabilities, 10 times the manpower, 10 times the amount of rockets? That's like 15,000 rockets that Hamas has, 150,000 that Hezbollah has. Inside the country called Lebanon, how you make them move the ground force that they built, that has been training for years to do the kind of attack that the Hamas ground force did on October 7th? Would you want to move back up north before you know that they're nowhere near the border? Who do you trust to be the one that makes sure that they're really not near the border? That the people who live up there inside those communities are not suddenly next to the same kind of threat of what happened on October 7th. We're in for a long war, and I say that after 75 days of war, and I need to broaden it even a bit more. It's called me glasses, just make sure I still have a few more minutes, and I'm going to broaden it even more. Because when I say Hezbollah, I go to Iran. When I say Iran, because Hezbollah is both Lebanese, Arabic Shiites who live in Lebanon, and they establish themselves inspired by the Iranian Revolution as Lebanese Arabic-speaking Shiites. They are also very much a proxy, a disciple of both the exporting of the Iranian Revolution itself, but they are by far, and I'm being cynical, but it's me who talks about these things, they are the Iranian success story. Look at what happens when you fund, when you train, when you arm. Look at how much strength they have. Look how Hezbollah inside Lebanon, as a local Lebanese enormous force, has at the end a type of deterrence with Israel. I said it already before, and I say it again, that Hezbollah to a certain degree has created in the last 7 weeks, 10 weeks, almost 11 weeks, a buffer zone into Israel. Again, you know these places: Manara Mizgav'am, Iftach Malkia, Avivim Kiryat Shmone, Metula. Can I keep on going down the list? People don't live there. That Hezbollah created into Israel. And I said behind Hezbollah, Iran, and Iran does not want Hezbollah to use that full force that they have equipped them with. They don't want to, because that enormous Hezbollah capability is to make sure that if anybody thinks that they're going to go after Iran, a nuclear Iran, any kind of capabilities of Iran, the response will be from Hezbollah in Lebanon. So what have the Iranians let out into the world? And in this case, I really feel that they let the genie out of the bottle, and I say it as if funny, and that's called the Houthis in Yemen. Who has not heard in the last few weeks of the Houthis in Yemen? The Houthis are Shiites, like the Hezbollah, like the Iranian revolutionary regime. The Houthis are Yemenite and speak Yemen, just like the Hezbollah are Lebanese and speak Arabic, and Iran, they speak Persian. I say that because they're not the same. But the Houthis have been trained, remember, armed, trained, inspired by the Iranian Revolution. And there's no question whatsoever that Iran said, okay, Houthis, get going, get things on there. And they started to attack. And it's never funny, but it's going to impact you in the United States. It's going to impact all of Europe. And the United States has put together a task force, which is a task force to take care against the Houthis who are in Yemen. Go look at a map after this briefing. The arena where the Houthis are, where Yemen is, has always been a geopolitical strategic place. For those who are Jews within the audience in this one, because I don't know if you're Jews or non-Jews, that's where the Queen of Sheba was kind of from, okay, to a certain degree. It's a rich land. It's a pivotal kind of place, and it's the main, I think that the number is like 15% of world shipping goes next to them. And they've been attacking the international shipping route. They say that it's everything that's coming to Israel. It's not. They say that it's because it's either Israeli owned, maybe soon they're going to say Jewish owned. We could talk about, it's not. They're attacking everything. And the international community, specifically under the United States, has reenacted a task force that already existed. The US, the British, the French, and slowly additional countries are actively now trying to both preempt against the Houthi attacks against the shipping. But what we don't talk about is how this is going to impact Egypt to our south. Egypt's income is from the Suez Canal. If the ships don't go through the Suez Canal, they don't pay Egypt. Guess what? Egypt doesn't have an income. That's our big neighbor to the south, 110 million people that border the Gaza Strip. I give you that because there is no local event here. Hamas is local and not local. Hamas, in that sense, hand in hand, both, as I said, Hamas called them out. Hezbollah is participating. Hezbollah goes to Iran. Iran goes down to Yemen. Yemen stops the shipping. It hits Egypt. Egypt is the back entrance into the Gaza Strip. So what am I looking at? I don't know how to give it dates, but to me, it's clear that the war is going to continue a long time. The high intensity will probably be for another few weeks. And then it's going to continue at low intensity, but it's going to be a war. It's not going to not be a war. And it's going to be both down south and this continuation with Hezbollah. And I don't know to tell you what will develop there, but the added aspect now is that what happens against the Houthis in Yemen is something that is going to also impact us all. So every time I talk, I always say, at least in Israel, right, even though this is a glass of water, right, it's a good time. I mean, here it's already evening to like drink that good scotch, good whiskey, because we need to breathe in deep, maybe get some good Israeli red wine, okay? We need to have resilience. We need to be in long term. We need to take care of Israelis who have lost their communities where they live, and it's not for a short time. Not just the rebuilding of the communities down south, the re-establishment or re-inhabiting of the communities up north that are still being targeted. There's a lot of damage going up north inside those communities as we talk, and breathing in deep, it's going to take a while. So yet again, I get to be the prophetess of doom, and I greatly appreciate your listening, even though happy it does not make us. And at this stage along the way, I'll hand back over to Gary. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you very, very much, Miri. That was an incredible presentation, very comprehensive and very timely. And I know it's after 5 in Israel, and it's only noon in Washington, or 1 o'clock in Washington, or something along those lines. Is it too early for me to dig into that single malt scotch? I'm kind of tempted.
Go for it,
Anyway,
I say. It's like it's 7:30 in Israel. Drink with me. It's good. This isn't mulled scotch. Don't think that that's what I'm doing, but I'm all for it.
all right. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was fabulous. And we do have a few questions. I think Miri has answered most of them. And unfortunately, we don't have time right now to go through the chat. So I hope you'll understand that. It is my pleasure at this point to welcome Ruby Chen to the podium. Ruby's son, Itai, is a soldier with the Israel Defense Forces, and he's been missing in action since Saturday morning, October 7. Ruby, can you share any information and your feelings with us, please?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, just to be precise, he's not missing in action. He was abducted and kidnapped by the Hamas terrorist organization. And I'd like to applaud Miri. Miri, I don't know how you did it so eloquently and so comprehensive. But as you know, Jewish people, when they talk about a subject, two people, they have five different opinions. So I'll just add two things, if I may, just to comment on what you were able to describe. One, yes, Israel has two objectives. One is the destruction of Hamas, and two is the release of the hostages. Those timelines don't always meet. So one thing is important, and the other thing is urgent. See my thought? I don't have time. So as Miri said, this thing could go on for months. It's been 75 days. I don't have much longer. And I don't want my kid in the bag. I want him alive. How do we make that happen? And the other thing, really, I'd like to just add, I'm sure you have a pretty good view on it. Quoting President Biden from last week when we met him, talking to him, don't give up, hope. And hope was a part of the equation, at least the US administration believes in. And it's not just hope for us, but also hope in the region itself. And without having an alternative for that hope, for a better future, then we lost to the extremists. So there needs to be that component as well in your overview of what does that mean and how could that look like. President Biden believes very much that the attack was a subset of the discussion going on with Saudi and creating economic projects in the Middle East, which was an incentive for those attacks to come out, but that's a different topic. So let me introduce myself. I'm a New Yorker. Grew up on the streets of Flatbush in Brooklyn. That's where the accent is, so people don't think I'm from Montana. I like to say proud outcome of the New York public education system. Came out a bit rough on the edges, but I hope not too shabby. I moved to Israel with my family at the age of 12. So did high school, Boy Scouts, the IDF, so that turned me more or less into an Israeli. But moved back to the States, did New York University, but also worked for the American Zionist Youth Foundation, telling US teenagers what a wonderful place Israel is. Started to believe the stuff that I was talking about. Went back here, met my wife. My wife is the daughter of a El Al pilot. So she basically traveled with her father all across the globe. And she told me, look, if you want to keep this thing going, then you need to come to the conclusion that this is the best place to live and this is where we're going to have a family. So those more or less are my negotiation skills, as I've been living in Tel Aviv for about 25 years. I have three sons. The eldest actually is an IDF soldier as well in a elite technology unit. Itai is the middle one. And always, I don't know about you guys, but the middle, child, the sandwich, is always the unique one inside of the family that needs to connect between the eldest and the youngest. So that's where Itai is very much missed inside of my family. And Alon is the youngest, and he celebrated his bar mitzvah about a month and a half ago. And we, of course, had a lot of thoughts about how and if we should do that bar mitzvah, but at the end, we reached the conclusion that Alon spent so much time studying for the bar mitzvah, and he should have a positive recollection of that event, regardless of what happens with us. So actually, the bar mitzvah was more of a spiritual thing. We had people coming in from all over, just wanted to give us a hug. The rabbi said, it was more packed than Yom Kippur. And we had that bar mitzvah and hope to have it again soon. Thank you for the congratulations. And our life kind of stopped 75 days ago. So that morning, Itai is in a unit that is tanks. So he is stationed at the border of Gaza. For you, I do not need to explain, but just to emphasize, he is protecting a sovereign part of the land of Israel that is not in some sort of international conflict. He is protecting agricultural communities, what we call kibbutz, people that work the land, simple folk that try to make ends meet. That morning, we got contact from him in the morning, 6:30, saying the base is under some sort of missile attack. But unfortunately, we've been accustomed to having those types of messages from people living in the south. And we kept on a regular Saturday routine. But after a couple of hours and not being able to contact him or other people that were with him, we understood things might be a bit different. And then the video started coming out. That's when we started, as we would say in New York, shitting in our pants. And we waited, another day, and we went to the police headquarters that was put together, and our son was defined as missing in action, meaning nobody knew where he was in the field. No one could identify him. He wasn't in one of the hospitals, and he wasn't on any of the deceased lists. A couple of days passed by. 6 o'clock in the morning, we get a knock on the door. I look inside of the keyhole and see 2 officers, army officers. I do not wish my biggest enemies to feel what I felt. You basically want those people to go away. You want them to disappear. You don't want to open that door. But at the end, you need to come back to reality, and you need to find the courage somehow to open that door. And you have the 2 guys looking at you, and they say, calm down, calm down. So the good news, so to speak, is your son has been identified as being abducted, kidnapped by a savage terrorist organization called Hamas. And that's the good news. I don't need to tell you what the bad news is. And that was about 70 days ago. We do not have sign of life. We have, unfortunately, been in constant contact with the International Red Cross. That I'd like to remind everybody that they have a permanent mandate by the international community, international law, to visit any individual that is under distress, being held captive, a victim of violent actions, any place, anywhere. They claim that that is not possible. There's been no ability to receive medical attention. There have been organizations such as Doctors Without Borders wishing to get in to Gaza, again denied by the Hamas terrorist organization. And we've been living basically in some sort of hell. Well, it's actually more than that. It's a different type of universe. So I've been transported to a different universe from October 7th, where time works a bit differently. You wake up in the morning, you try to figure out what's going on, and then you get that slap of reality saying, yeah, it's actually happening again. And you try to do whatever you can to bring somehow my son back home. And after working 16, 17, 18 hours, and you try to ask yourself a simple question. Okay, have you been productive in moving the release of your son 1 inch? And you don't have a good answer. And that's what's been going on for 75 days. And despair is on my shoulder, looking at me, trying to take over my soul and my wife and my family, as well as the other families of hostages. And it's unbearable to continue to live like this. And I go back to my clock, where we know the hostages that were released, that they have been tortured, not just the women, men as well. Conditions are not conditions, even though the Israeli IDF is trying to do whatever it can to get the hostages out and not harm them. It's a very difficult task. And the question is how to come to a resolution that enables us to be whole again and get our loved ones that are held hostage back alive, with the emphasis of alive. So we understand, going back to Miri's overview, that this land exercise is indeed a lever to get the hostages out, but what we do not want is to see hostages left back. And we are urging everyone, from the Israeli government to the US government to everybody else, we need all the hostages out now, because if we keep on going on the salami, that's what Hamas wants. And we need to get everybody out, because 75 days living like that is unbearable. I hope to thank my kid, Itai. He's a very talented kid. Like, as a Jewish father, I'm sure all of you, given the opportunity to talk about your children in front of a captive audience, you could talk about them for hours. So I'll try to speak shortly about him and just say he typically is the life of the party. He dances, he sings. And the only way I kind of am able to cope with the fact that he's being held hostage is that hopefully he knows how to do a lot of magic with cards. So hopefully someone gave him a deck of cards and he's playing cards with some other folks, buying time, and hopefully getting it one day at a time. What we need from you guys. So as a US citizen, we kind of came together, the US citizens, immediately after October 7th, and we did a press conference, so the administration knew about us. We had a phone call where we met, actually, Secretary of State Blinken, like 2 days after. We were privileged to have a Zoom call with the President of the United States that week. It was supposed to be a Zoom call of 15 minutes with all of the families. After 15 minutes, one of the aides wanted to kind of move the president to the next topic. And he looked at him and he said, "Last time I checked, I'm the President of the United States, and I'll say when this meeting ends." And he stayed on the call with us for an hour and a half. And it was imperative for him to convey the message that there's nothing more important to him than this topic of the hostages, specifically the US hostages. We've been mobilizing ourselves to be in the US as much as possible. The last month I've been in the US 3 times. I only do Washington. If someone here is from Washington, we'll be glad to meet him next time, where we are meeting congressmen, the administration, and had the opportunity last week, as I mentioned, the President of the United States himself spent time with us. Again, 45-minute meeting that kept on for about an hour and a half. And at the end, he kind of said to us, "You have something else after this?" We were like, "No." So he said, okay, come with me to the Oval Office, and he gave us a VIP tour. So again, just to show he's a mensch. So he sees this as something that he takes very personal based on his history as well, that has grief in his family. But we need to keep this as much as possible as a bipartisan topic. We also meet the Republican senators. There have been many delegations coming here. That has been bipartisan. I met last week Lindsey Graham, Senator Cruz. He himself comes from a family that was held captive in Cuba. And we believe that is one of the pillars of the strategy that we have in order to keep this topic as top of mind of the U.S. People as much as possible. What we need from you is to keep this topic as well in your minds and in your communities. There's only so much that we could do. We are 8 U.S. families. We are 7 U.S. families with 8 U.S. hostages. There's one family that's a couple. And what we need you guys is to give a call after this meeting to your congressman, to your senator. Ask him, what have you done today for the release of the hostages, which is a humanitarian crisis, and specifically the U.S. hostages? And tell him at the end of that call, you know what? I'm going to give you a call, same call, tomorrow morning as well. And get them to do whatever possible, either within the administration or outside the administration, to solve this humanitarian crisis. And I agree with Miri that we all feel, for what is happening in Gaza, which is also a humanitarian crisis, that we see hundreds of people killed each day, and this needs to stop. And that's where, let's call it the adults, okay? The US, but also the international community need to represent the hostages. Qatar needs to represent the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and they need to come up with a deal. And that deal needs to go to the children that have been playing for the last couple of weeks, come to some conclusion, again, specifically about the hostages and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I don't have the answers for the bigger picture, which I totally agree with Miri, which is highly complicated, and that's a little bit above my pay grade. But what I do know is that I don't have any time. And I want to go back to where my life stopped, October 7th, and continue where I was before. I want my family. And what I need from you guys, again, support and conveying to your representatives, we need to get this done. Today, we just had Hanukkah, which is the time of miracle for the Jewish people. We have been praying a lot. It's also, time of the end of the year for Christians as well. Within your community, please convey the message as well. We had an empty seat at our table, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah. Also for the people inside of your community, I would also like to ask them as well, in their Christmas dinner, have an empty chair for the hostages. And remember that there are families, U.S. families, okay, that are suffering. And this type of event has not happened since 1979 with the U.S. hostages in Iran. And this needs to come to an end. So it's not a Jewish thing. It's not an Israeli thing. Think of it as a U.S. thing that needs to be solved as well. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Ruby, for sharing a very, very difficult story with us. You could see throughout the chats that so many of the JNF family have you in their prayers, and we all pray that Itai will be home soon and reunited with your wonderful family. And no, we will not forget.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good
end.
evening from Tel Aviv.
I take a real quick moment just to introduce Ron Werner, who is a member of the JNF-USA Board of Directors and president of Alexander Muss High School in Israel. He is in Israel now with the second JNF-USA volunteer mission. Ron, could you give us a very quick update? Ron, you're muted.
The theme
There you go.
of our trip this week, I'm going to tell you, is hugs. And just like at JNF, we say that we're a hugging Jewish national family. Miri, I wish I could give you a hug. It's the second time we shared a Zoom. And on Sunday, Ruby and I met at the hostage forum where we did hug. I was with Tali Zor, our chief of staff in Israel, and Carl Kaplan, a member of the Muss High School board with me. We were meeting with Malki Shem Tov and had the privilege of meeting Ruby and asked him to join us today. Ruby, I want you to know that last night I was watching Keshet Shtemishrei, and Jake Sullivan was wearing the dog tag that you gave him in Washington last week, and he said he's not taking it off, and he really spoke about it a lot. So first thing I want to tell you before we get into the working trip is that the Alexander Muss High School has students returning in January. We're working very hard to firm up the numbers, but we are going back in business. We are bringing students back to Israel to learn, to live, and to love in Israel. The trip I'm on that JNF-USA has put together is our second working trip. We have 70 people on 2 buses that came here to work. I've been on many JNF missions. I have chaired many JNF missions. I have never seen so many people smiling so much, particularly with the time that our buses are rolling out of the hotels in the morning. On our first day, we were in Otef Yisrael, 9 kilometers from the border with Gaza, where we were picking oranges. I would like to report that the owner of this moshav said we did a better job than his Thai workers. He ran out of the bins for the oranges. We picked 15 tons of oranges. Our group of 70 people picked 15 tons of oranges, and then we sat down in the field on mats to have a simple box lunch. From there, we went to the new Muss South campus in Beersheba, where we created packages for wounded people in the hospitals, as well as getting a tour of our beautiful campus. Yesterday, we were up north, just a few kilometers from the border with Lebanon, everything that Miri was talking about. We went into a Druze village where we partnered with a woman who's connected to our Galilee Small Business Association. Her business has obviously been devastated during the crisis. Nonetheless, she's been making meals for soldiers every day. And she got a call and they wanted food. She thought maybe they wanted food for 40. They wanted food for 400 soldiers. Her answer, no problem. Her late husband, by the way, fought in the IDF. Our team there was preparing food, writing notes, and we made hamburger boxes with other specialties for 400 soldiers that we delivered later in the day. Those soldiers have moved into a kibbutz that was evacuated. The country's being really smart at how it's using the land. Today, we worked with Sarel. Sarel is a volunteer group that supports the IDF. Our group today put together 400 packages of special food. I don't know if you thought about what our soldiers are eating when they're in Gaza. I've been talking to some that came out recently, and the answer is tuna. And of course, then my next question is, do you sleep? And they say, well, maybe 2 hours. Today, we're making specialty boxes for them, 4,000 strong. While we were there, Brigadier General Segev Starbit came in to see what was happening. He is the general in charge of all logistics for food, for medical, basically everything except military equipment supporting the army. I was telling him about JNF-USA, as well as about what we do at the Muss High School in Israel. After we were speaking, he looked at me and he said, Ron, can I hug you? That's what we're finding everywhere. The land of Israel is the land of hugs. And when a brigadier general asks to hug you, because we're coming as volunteers, it really makes a statement. What he also told me was that if we weren't here as volunteers, if Sarel wasn't operating, Soldiers would have to do that work, which would take them away from other important work. So the message here is, it's really good being in Israel. If you're thinking of coming to Israel, come to Israel. If you're not thinking of coming to Israel, come to Israel. Israel needs us now more than ever. It is the most important time that we can come as volunteers to support our brothers and sisters. It's the most important time that you send your children, your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren to the Alexander Muss High School in Israel. This year in 2024, we plan to have more students than we've ever had before. Israel's different. It's heavy right now. There's a cloud hanging over it. As I simply say, it's a lot. For me, it took a lot of processing. I've had a lot of experiences here. It's good to be here. And one of the ways that we as Americans who love Israel, who love our brothers and sisters in Israel, can help them and our land and how we can lift the cloud is to come here and to hug. My friends, check out JNF-USA's volunteer trips to Israel. Come to Israel. We're adding more and more trips. You will not regret working for 4 days in Israel, helping our family. Thank you very much from Tel Aviv.
Ron, thank you very much for all you do for JNF, for Alexander Muss High School. We're giving you a collective hug today, and just be safe, and we'll be with you. We'll all be with you. At this point, I'll close today's session. Our next weekly briefing will be 1 week from today, Wednesday, December 27th, at the same Zoom address. Thank you all for giving your time today, and I hope you'll join us next week. Yisrael Chai.